As evening approached, painting the lake in soft pastels, I walked Susan to her rental car. "Thank you again, Susan," I said sincerely, "for coming back, for fighting this." She squeezed my arm warmly. "Some battles are worth fighting, Mark. Some things are just right." As her taillights disappeared down the road leading to the bridge, I felt lighter, more hopeful than I had in months. My gaze drifted across the darkening water towards my island, my trees, and my heart stopped cold. Smoke. Thick black smoke was rising from among my precious trees, stark and ugly against the beautiful sunset sky. "No!" I screamed, the sound torn from my throat as I sprinted headlong towards my boat, raw terror replacing the fragile hope of moments before. Who would dare to burn my island now? And could I possibly reach it in time to save my tree army before it was too late? Acrid smoke filled my lungs, burning my throat and eyes as I leaped frantically from my boat onto the smoldering shore. My beautiful trees, my green army, were burning. Angry orange flames licked greedily at the branches of several saplings, while others stood blackened and scarred. Horrifyingly, a crew of HOA maintenance workers, led by Gary Schmidt, the maintenance boss, just stood nearby, hoses and equipment lying unused on the ground, passively watching the destruction. "Stop this! Put it out right now!" I yelled, running towards Gary, my voice choked with smoke and fury. Gary Schmidt wouldn't meet my eyes, shuffling his feet awkwardly in the dirt. Just doing our job, Mr. Davison. Fire safety work. Clearing brush," he mumbled, his guilt palpable. "Fire safety?" I shrieked incredulously. "It poured rain just yesterday. These trees aren't dry. This isn't brush. These are saplings I planted." The workers stared down at their boots, shame written on their faces. One younger guy, whose face looked vaguely familiar and kind, leaned closer and whispered quickly, "We didn't want to do this, sir. Honest. She made us, threatened our jobs." She, Barbara, or maybe Tiffany, my hands shaking with rage. I grabbed my phone and started recording everything. The healthy green trees, actively burning, the guilty, downcast faces of the workers, the clearly unnecessary, malicious destruction. Then I called 911 again. "Fire on Sapphire Lake Island. My property is on fire and the HOA is setting it." While waiting for the fire department, my eyes scanned the area, and I spotted Tiffany Croft's distinctive white SUV parked partially hidden on the access road near the bridge. She was outside the vehicle, phone raised, taking pictures of me, panicking amidst the smoke and flames. And she was actually smiling, a cruel, triumphant smirk as my trees died. When she saw me notice her, she quickly jumped back in her SUV and sped away. The audacity, the sheer malice, was breathtaking. Finally, the wail of sirens grew closer. Fire trucks rumbled over the bridge. Chief Harrison jumped out first, his face grim as he took in the scene. "What in the blazes happened here, Davison?" "The HOA is burning my trees, deliberately, without permission," I explained frantically, showing him the video I'd just taken. "They called it fire safety. This isn't an approved burn," Chief Harrison said, his expression hardening with anger. "We never issued a permit for anything like this today." His team quickly started unreeling hoses and spraying water on the remaining flames. I felt physically sick, watching my brave little tree army fall victim to this vicious attack. Some were completely incinerated, just blackened sticks. Others were badly scorched, but might survive. My carefully crafted plan to block the solar panels with a living green shield was literally going up in smoke. That night, sleep was utterly impossible. The pervasive, sickening smell of burnt wood filled my house, a constant reminder of the assault. Around midnight, a powerful thunderstorm rolled violently across the lake. Rain pounded against my roof like angry fists, and lightning flashed every few minutes, illuminating the ravaged shoreline. I sat by my window, watching nature's fury, feeling it perfectly mirrored my own turbulent anger and despair. Suddenly, a massive, blindingly bright lightning bolt struck near the solar panel installation. The light was so intense, it momentarily lit up my entire living room, followed instantly by a deafening boom that shook the whole house, rattling windows in their frames. Then, an eerie silence, broken only by the steady drumming of the rain. At dawn, morbid curiosity overriding my exhaustion, I walked through my muddy, charred garden towards the shoreline to assess the storm's impact. The lightning had scored a direct hit on the main control box for the entire solar array. The heavy metal box was blackened, buckled, and partially melted, with frayed wires dangling uselessly. A quick visual inspection revealed that at least 30, maybe more, of the solar panels themselves were cracked or shattered, some hanging precariously sideways off their mountings. It was a scene of satisfying, almost biblical retribution. Just then, my phone buzzed. Another text from the unknown number I now thought of as my guardian angel. Check your email, now. Evidence about the fire. My heart pounded as I opened the attached files. The first photos clearly showed Tiffany Croft handing a thick envelope of cash to Gary Schmidt in a parking lot yesterday morning. Another picture showed a typed work order, seemingly bearing Barbara Thorne's signature. Remove invasive trees, island property, ASAP. Use any means necessary prior to potential county inspection. Proof, irrefutable proof of arson and conspiracy. As I stared at my phone in shock, absorbing the implications, a community-wide alert popped up. Emergency HOA meeting, 3 p.m. today, Community Center, attendance mandatory. My fingers flew as I texted Susan Miller. Are you coming back for the meeting? Big developments. She replied almost instantly, already here, with the district attorney. Don't tell anyone. Bring all your evidence. See you there. Could this emergency meeting, called so abruptly after the fire and the lightning strike, actually be the final turning point in this long, exhausting battle? Or was it somehow another desperate trap set by Barbara and Tiffany to try and finish me off completely? I walked into the packed community center later that afternoon, gripping my phone tightly, the incriminating photos and documents ready. Every single chair was filled. People stood packed 3 deep against the walls, whispering anxiously about the solar panel damage, the fire on my island, and the swirling rumors of financial misconduct. I noticed several TV news vans parked conspicuously outside. Someone, likely my anonymous ally, or perhaps Susan, had tipped them off. Arthur Finch, the HOA's lawyer, stood nervously at the front podium, looking sweaty and deeply uncomfortable. Barbara Thorne was conspicuously absent, but Tiffany Croft sat defiantly in the front row, attempting to project an air of smug control, though a faint tremor in her hands betrayed her anxiety. "Where's our president?" someone shouted from the back. Arthur Finch cleared his throat, adjusting his tie repeatedly. "Ms. Thorne, sends her regrets," he stammered. She had an unexpected personal matter arise that required her immediate attention. "You mean the police showed up at her house this morning with a warrant?" yelled Mrs. Davis from the back row, her voice ringing through the suddenly silent room. The room erupted in shocked gasps and excited murmurs. Tiffany Croft leaped to her feet and grabbed the microphone. "Everyone, please calm down," she commanded, her voice overly loud. "As vice president, I will run this meeting." The first order of business is voting on emergency assessments to cover the unfortunate fire damage to the island property's trees and the unexpected lightning sabotage of the solar array. Sabotage? I stood up, unable to contain my outrage. Are you suggesting I somehow controlled the lightning, Tiffany? The absurdity of the accusation drew nervous laughter from parts of the room. Tiffany's face flushed crimson. I have something I need to share, I announced loudly, walking purposefully towards the front. Tiffany tried to physically block my path, but Arthur Finch, surprisingly, stepped quickly between us. The chair recognizes the island resident, Finch said firmly, perhaps finally realizing which way the legal winds were blowing. I quickly connected my phone to the large projector screen. The damning picture of Tiffany Croft handing cash to Gary Schmidt flashed onto the wall, large and undeniable. This photograph, I stated clearly, my voice amplified by the microphone, was taken yesterday morning, shortly before my trees were deliberately and illegally burned. I swiped to the next photo, the work order, with Barbara's signature authorizing removal by any means necessary. More gasps echoed through the room. Tiffany lunged towards my phone, screeching, "That's fake, it's photoshopped!" But Arthur Finch physically grabbed her arm, restraining her. Just then, the back doors of the community center swung open dramatically. Susan Miller walked in, flanked by a stern-looking woman in a sharp business suit and two uniformed police officers. District Attorney Rivera, the woman in the suit announced, her voice commanding immediate silence and attention. My office is conducting an active investigation into financial fraud, conspiracy, and destruction of property related to the Pinarest Point HOA. She looked directly at Tiffany. Ms. Croft, please remain seated. One officer calmly positioned himself beside Tiffany's chair, while the other stood guard near the main door. DA Rivera then addressed the stunned crowd. We have uncovered disturbing evidence suggesting significant financial irregularities. The solar installation company contracted by your HOA is, in fact, majority owned by Judith Palmer's brother-in-law. It appears the HOA was billed nearly triple the standard market rate for the project, with substantial evidence suggesting the difference was illicitly split between several board members and potentially laundered through inflated maintenance contracts. A news reporter near the front slipped in closer, his camera rolling, capturing every word. Robert Bell jumped up defensively. But the solar project was supposed to be for clean energy, for the community's benefit. Susan Miller stepped forward. Follow the money, Robert, she advised pointedly. Your HOA fees increased by 40% last year alone. Did any of you ever actually see detailed financial statements justifying that? Were they ever properly audited or filed with the state as required? A wave of shaking heads and murmurs swept the room. The DA nodded grimly. We have frozen all HOA bank accounts pending a full forensic audit. Preliminary findings indicate the maintenance and reserve funds are almost entirely depleted. Arthur Finch looked positively green. As legal counsel, he stammered, I must advise the board and the HOA that it faces serious civil and potentially criminal liability regarding the improperly authorized installation, the destruction of private property, and the illegal burning. Suddenly, Tiffany Croft bolted, making a desperate dash for the side emergency exit. The officer near the door intercepted her easily before she reached it. "Let go of me!" she shrieked, struggling futilely. "Do you have any idea who my husband is?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied calmly, securing her wrists. "He's already at the station downtown, answering questions related to potential wire fraud." The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Then, Martha Jenkins, leaning heavily on her cane but standing tall, rose slowly from her seat. I have lived in Pinehurst Point for 30 years, she declared, her voice trembling slightly but filled with conviction. And I have never, ever seen such shameful, greedy, deceitful behavior from those elected to serve us. We need new leadership, honest leadership. She pointed a determined, slightly shaky finger directly at me. We need someone like Mark Davison, someone who fights for what's right for all of us, even when they have to stand alone against the storm. Slowly at first, then growing steadily louder and more confident, clapping started throughout the room. It swelled into a genuine ovation, a wave of relief and renewed hope washing over the community. 3 months later, my island looked different, yet comfortingly familiar. The surviving trees, resilient and strong, were growing fast, already tall enough to partially obscure the shoreline area where the ill-fated solar panels had once stood. Those panels were long gone now, removed, properly recycled, and ironically, partially reinstalled on the community center roof, where they had belonged all along, quietly generating power without controversy. I dug my hands into the rich, dark soil, carefully planting new seedlings alongside the recovering survivors, replacing the ones lost to the fire. Healing, rebuilding. A familiar boat motor approached my dock. It was Robert Bell and Martha Jenkins, bringing over lunch. The new garden looks simply wonderful, Mark, Martha called out cheerfully, waving as I helped her carefully from the boat. Thanks to your special fertilizer mix, Martha, I replied with a warm smile. Robert handed me a folded local newspaper, a sheepish but friendly expression on his face. Thought you'd want to see this, he said quietly. The headline blared, HOA fraud case concludes, former officials sentenced. Justice, it seemed, had finally prevailed. We sat together on my porch, enjoying delicious sandwiches and cool lemonade, looking out at the now truly peaceful lake. No ugly panels marred the view. No angry neighbors lurked with threats. No violation notices fluttered menacingly. Just the gentle lapping of water, the rustle of leaves, and the easy comfort of good company. You know, Robert said thoughtfully, breaking the comfortable silence, when I first complained to you about those panels glaring onto my deck, I never imagined it would lead to, well, all this. He gestured around, encompassing the island, the lake, the sense of restored normalcy. Martha patted my hand kindly. Sometimes, Mark, standing up for your own land ends up meaning you're standing up for everyone. It just takes one person, one voice, to make a real difference. I nodded slowly, watching a family of ducks glide serenely past my shoreline. She was right. It hadn't been easy. It had been terrifying, exhausting, and expensive. But it had been necessary. Framed prominently in my home office now are the newly ratified HOA rules, changes we, the homeowners, voted in overwhelmingly after dissolving the old board. All major expenditures and community projects require a transparent proposal process and a documented 75% resident approval vote. Private property rights are explicitly reaffirmed and protected. And perhaps most importantly, Rule No. 17. All official HOA meetings must henceforth provide adequate refreshments. Robert Bell had insisted on that one, and we all laughed and agreed. Sometimes it turns out you might need to metaphorically or almost literally grow an army of trees to protect your home and your rights. But in the end, it's the community you rebuild, the trust you foster, and the principles you stand for that truly matter most. Justice, much like those resilient trees, sometimes just needs the right conditions and enough determined tending to finally take root and grow strong. This story serves as a powerful reminder to always read the fine print, especially HOA covenants, before buying property. Never assume everything is standard. It also highlights the critical importance of verifying information independently, like checking county records, and the potential for conflicts of interest within powerful organizations. Most importantly, it shows that even when facing overwhelming odds and seemingly corrupt systems, one determined individual, armed with the truth and supported by allies, even unexpected ones, can fight back and achieve justice. Persistence, documentation, and courage can make all the difference. What would you have done in Mark Davison's situation? Would you have planted the trees, confronted the HOA sooner? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and fighting back against injustice, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to the channel for more compelling narratives. Tried to make a run for it, Mark explained, managing a grin, despite a trickle of blood coming from his nose. Figured I'd help him, trip. The officers efficiently led the stunned and furious Petersons away in handcuffs. Minutes later, Agent Miller arrived, her face grim as she surveyed the wreckage of my home. "You're lucky," she said gravely, her eyes scanning the broken glass and overturned furniture. "These two were just the start. Anthony Russo doesn't leave loose ends." They knew, I told her, still shaking from the ordeal. They knew the FBI was watching them. Agent Miller frowned sharply, pulling out her phone. "That's impossible, unless—" She made a quick, curt call. "We need a full internal sweep for leaks, now." After hanging up, she turned back to me, her expression deeply troubled. "This goes even deeper than we initially thought. The HOA wasn't just a vehicle for laundering money. We now believe Crystal Bay Shores was deliberately established, from its inception, for criminal purposes." She unfolded a large, detailed map of the lake and the surrounding terrain, pointing to unusual underwater topographical features. "This lake connects subterraneanly through a series of old, disguised tunnels to waterways in 3 different counties. It's a perfect, almost undetectable route for moving illicit goods without ever having to cross main roads or checkpoints." "What kinds of things?" I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Everything," she replied grimly, "from drugs and weapons to high-value stolen art and electronics. But we need hard, physical evidence beyond what we've found tonight." She looked at me seriously, the gravity of the situation settling heavily between us. "You are now absolutely central to our ongoing investigation, which unfortunately puts you in significantly more danger. Anthony Russo will not stop just because his primary associates got arrested." A profound chill ran through me, colder than the night air. Just then, Agent Miller's phone buzzed with an urgent text message. Her expression darkened instantly as she read it. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. "Russo knows about the arrests," she said, her voice low and tense. "And we just intercepted a coded message. He's heading this way, himself." I woke the next morning, not to the sound of birds, but to angry shouting erupting just outside my boarded-up window. Peeking through a gap, my stomach plummeted. A volatile crowd had gathered on my front lawn. Neighbors I'd lived beside, shared polite waves with for years, were now glaring at my house as if I were the devil incarnate. Victoria's closest friends, the Crawfords, were front and center, aggressively handing out cheaply printed flyers. My photo was plastered on them under the huge, bold red words, "FBI informant." "He's trying to destroy our property values," shouted Linda Crawford, pointing a trembling finger directly at my house. "The Petersons built this community. They cared about us, and he's working with the government to tear it all down." The irony was sickening, but the crowd seemed to be buying it. My phone rang. It was Agent Miller, her voice urgent. "Don't engage with them. Stay inside. We've intercepted more messages suggesting Anthony Russo has eyes, likely local hires, on your property right now. I watched helplessly through the blinds as Mark Davies bravely pushed through the hostile crowd, attempting to reason with them, trying to explain the Petersons' wrongdoing. Linda Crawford literally shoved him back. This wasn't just about an HOA dispute anymore. It wasn't even just about the Petersons. The neighborhood had become a volatile powder keg of fear and misinformation, and apparently I was the one holding the lit match. Just then, my doorbell camera alert pinged. Someone hadn't rung, but had slipped an envelope under my door. Heart pounding, I retrieved it cautiously. Inside was a standard USB drive and a single folded sheet of paper. The note, written in neat block letters, read, "I worked as Victoria's personal assistant for 2 years. She kept separate books, hidden ones. This proves everything. Be careful." My hands trembled as I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, praying it wasn't some kind of trap. It wasn't. File after file opened, revealing a meticulously kept shadow ledger. Fake invoices from phantom contractors. Wildly inflated costs for non-existent services. Detailed records of properties purchased secretly through anonymous shell companies after their owners were forced out by HOA fines. The sheer scale of the theft was staggering. They hadn't just skimmed, they'd systematically embezzled over $2.3 million, our money meant for community improvements over 5 years. Our sky-high HOA fees hadn't been funding better landscaping or dock repairs. They'd been funding the Petersons' secret lake house hideaway in the Cayman Islands. I called Agent Miller immediately, my voice shaking with excitement and outrage. "I have it, the proof. Her assistant gave me everything. We have to tell everyone. Show them what the Petersons really are." "We need to move carefully," she warned, though I could hear the suppressed excitement in her voice too. "This is exactly what we needed. But remember who we're dealing with. Anthony Russo isn't just some thug. He's connected to serious, violent, organized crime. Victoria and Gregory's operation wasn't just about enriching themselves. They were laundering money for people who absolutely do not tolerate loose ends or exposure." While still on the call with Agent Miller, I noticed frantic activity across the street. A large moving truck was hastily pulling up to the Barrett's house, the family who'd yelled at me just yesterday. They were loading furniture onto the truck at breakneck speed, their faces masks of pure terror. I'd known Tom and Sarah Barrett for years. They were quiet, decent people who never caused trouble. "Something's happening at the Barretts," I told Agent Miller urgently. "They look terrified. They're moving out fast." I hung up, and ignoring Miller's earlier warning, but driven by a rising sense of dread, ran across the street. "Tom, Sarah, what's happening?" I called out. Tom Barrett pulled me aside sharply, glancing around nervously as if expecting to be overheard any second. "We can't stay, man," he whispered, his voice cracking with fear. "Last night, after the Petersons were arrested, someone smashed our windows, left a note, said we'd be next if we attended any community meetings or talked to anyone." "This is crazy," I exclaimed. "You can't let them scare you away like this." He pulled me further away from his wife and kids, who were huddled near the truck, crying. "Listen," he said, his voice dropping even lower, raw with shame and anger. "6 months ago, Victoria strong-armed us into signing over a small easement on our property for that stupid community garden that conveniently never materialized. When we threatened to get a lawyer involved, Gregory showed up. He didn't threaten us directly. He just showed us pictures, recent pictures, of our kids at their school bus stop." Tom's voice broke completely. "We're not the only ones, man. The Wilsons down the street, the Garshes, At least 8 families I know of have been threatened or intimidated like this over the years. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was systematic, ruthless intimidation targeting an entire community, silencing dissent through fear. My anger solidified into cold resolve. I quickly showed Tom the financial records on my phone from the USB drive. His face hardened instantly, fear momentarily replaced by righteous fury. "Everyone needs to see this," he declared, his voice firming. "Not just our neighbors here. The whole town needs to know what's been happening in Crystal Bay Shores." Together, we made a decision. We would organize an emergency community meeting. Not one controlled by Victoria's cronies, but a real one, open to everyone. We'd present the evidence, expose the lies, and take our community back. As I frantically prepared my presentation later that day, compiling the damning financial records and security footage clips, my phone buzzed again. Another text from an unknown number, chillingly direct: "Cancel the meeting, or the lake house burns tonight." My blood ran cold. This was Russo. He was escalating. I immediately forwarded the message to Agent Miller. Her response was swift. "Understood. We're moving in. Setting up hidden surveillance around your home and the community center right now. Don't cancel the meeting. This might be our best chance to draw Frost out and catch him in the act." The meeting was set for 7 p.m. at the community center clubhouse. By 6:30, the place was packed. Over 50 residents had shown up, far more than had ever attended a regular HOA meeting. Fear, mixed with anger and desperate hope, hung heavy in the air. Even some families who had been forced to move away years ago had returned, alerted by frantic calls and texts, eager for answers and justice. I was nervously reviewing my notes one last time when Mark Davies rushed in, his face pale. "Trouble," he breathed. "Someone just spotted Victoria's brother lurking in the parking lot. He doesn't even live here. He looks agitated." Before I could even process that, the lights in the community center flickered violently, then went out completely, plunging the room into near darkness. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Emergency backup generators sputtered to life a few seconds later, casting long, eerie shadows across dozens of frightened faces. And then we heard it. The unmistakable, deafening roar of a heavy diesel engine, growing rapidly louder. Through the large clubhouse windows, powerful headlights cut through the darkness. It was the same monstrous yellow semi-truck that had blocked my driveway, and it was now barreling at full speed, straight toward the community center's main glass entrance. People screamed, scrambling backwards, tripping over chairs in blind panic. The truck accelerated, a terrifying behemoth aimed directly at the building where 50 of my neighbors, including several small children who had tagged along with their parents, were trapped. I froze, watching in absolute horror, time slowing down as the massive vehicle charged towards us, destruction imminent. Then, just seconds before impact, the entire parking lot was suddenly flooded with blindingly bright lights. Unmarked FBI vehicles materialized seemingly out of nowhere, tires squealing as they formed an instant barricade, blocking the truck's path. The semi swerved violently at the last second, smashing head-on into a thick concrete retaining wall with a sickening crunch of metal instead of plowing through the clubhouse. Immediately, heavily armed FBI agents swarmed the disabled vehicle, weapons drawn, shouting commands. I watched, stunned into silence, as they forcibly pulled a bleeding, dazed Anthony Russo from the mangled driver's seat. Agent Miller rushed inside, her voice calm but commanding over the ensuing chaos. "Everyone stay calm. The immediate threat is secured. We've got him, but we need to move quickly and efficiently." As frightened neighbors huddled together, Murmuring and crying, I took a deep breath, walked to the front of the room, and connected my laptop to the projector system. Before tonight's interruption, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I discovered something you all need to see. The stark financial records, the shadow ledgers, flashed onto the large screen, silencing the room instantly. Even Victoria's most staunch supporters gasped audibly as the undeniable evidence of the Petersons' corruption filled the screen. The fake companies, the missing funds, the properties secretly purchased with money stolen directly from their neighbors. The Petersons, I stated clearly, pointing to the highlighted transactions, have systematically stolen over $2.3 million from this community over the past 5 years. Murmurs of disbelief turned into angry shouts. Every single time they raised our HOA fees, claiming it was for better services or essential lake maintenance, the money went straight into their pockets and offshore accounts. Tom Barrett stepped forward, his voice shaking but clear. They didn't just steal our money, he declared, looking around at his neighbors. They threatened our families. He recounted the chilling story of the intimidation tactics, the pictures of his children, the fear that had silenced him and others for so long. Linda Crawford stood up then, her face chalk white, tears streaming down her face. I didn't know, she stammered, looking at me with shame-filled eyes. Victoria told us, she swore, that you were trying to destroy the neighborhood, that you planned to build commercial properties on the lakefront. That's exactly what they wanted everyone to believe, Agent Miller interjected, stepping forward. But the real reason they targeted your neighbor, she nodded towards me, was much darker and far more calculated. She brought up satellite images and schematics of our lakefront onto the big screen. For at least 4 years, possibly longer, the Petersons and Anthony Russo have been using an extensive hidden underwater tunnel system beneath this very lake for large-scale smuggling operations. Gasps and horrified whispers filled the room. When your neighbor, Miller continued, gesturing towards me again, built his dock and driveway 5 years ago, he unknowingly, accidentally, blocked their primary, most convenient land access point to these tunnels. Rather than simply find another route, they decided it was easier and ultimately more profitable to force him out through escalating harassment and fraudulent HOA violations. Mark Davies wheeled in a large TV monitor, connecting it to a live feed. It showed FBI divers actively working in the murky lake water nearby. They're removing evidence right now, Miller explained, but we've already recovered significant quantities of drugs, illegal firearms, and high-value stolen goods from the tunnels. The crowd murmured in shock. The semi-truck tonight was Russo's desperate last-ditch attempt to re-establish his route and likely eliminate a key witness. You, she added, looking directly at me after we arrested Victoria and Gregory last night. My hand trembled slightly as I clicked to the next slide on my presentation. And this wasn't just about me, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Photos appeared on the screen, showing 8 different properties strategically located around the lake. The Petersons systematically targeted many families. I pointed out homes that had either been forced into sale under duress or had their access severely restricted through sudden, inexplicable rule changes. Every single one of these homes, we now realize, blocked potential access points or provided surveillance overlooks to their hidden tunnel network. An older woman I barely knew, Mrs. Gable, began crying softly in the back. They made me sell my house, she sobbed quietly. My home of 30 years, all because they claimed I violated some new, impossible landscaping rules. I lost everything. The meeting lasted for hours, well into the early morning, as neighbor after neighbor shared similar stories of intimidation, inexplicable fines, and crushing fear. Some shamefully admitted to helping Victoria spread rumors or enforce rules, either out of genuine, misplaced belief in her lies or out of paralyzing fear for their own families. The carefully curated image of our idyllic community had shattered, revealing a dark underbelly of corruption, greed, and threats that had festered for years. As dawn began to break, painting the sky in soft pastels, FBI crews were still meticulously working at the lake's edge. Agent Miller pulled me aside quietly, leading me to a window overlooking the water, now crawling with official activity. "We found something else during the dive," she said, her voice low. Something they were clearly very, very desperate to keep hidden. She showed me photos on her secure tablet. Waterproof, heavy-duty containers being pulled from a hidden recess deep within the tunnel system. Inside, not just drugs or cash, documents, hard drives, ledgers. "This wasn't just about smuggling," Miller explained, her expression grim. "The Petersons, likely under Russo's direction, were systematically collecting blackmail material, financial dirt, compromising photos, illegal transaction records on influential people throughout the county. Judges, police officials, prominent business leaders. Is that why?" I asked, the final horrifying piece clicking into place. "Is that why they targeted our specific neighborhood? Not just because of the lake access, but because they had leverage?" Agent Miller nodded slowly. Crystal Bay Shores wasn't chosen randomly. Gregory Peterson's father was one of the original contractors who built this subdivision 30 years ago. We believe the tunnels were part of the original hidden design, likely disguised as experimental drainage infrastructure back then. This entire community may have been conceived as a criminal enterprise from the very beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of chaos and reckoning. News crews camped outside our gates for days. Neighbors who'd been suspicious or openly hostile towards each other just weeks before were now united in shared shock, anger, and a strange sense of communal liberation. The FBI interviewed nearly everyone, meticulously piecing together years of intricate corruption, intimidation, and criminal activity. Victoria and Gregory Peterson refused to cooperate, maintaining a stony silence. But Anthony Russo, facing decades in federal prison, cut a deal. His testimony blew the lid off interconnected crime syndicates operating in 3 states. Dozens of arrests followed in the ensuing months, including 3 county officials who had inexplicably approved suspicious zoning changes and permits benefiting the Petersons and their shell companies over the years. 1 month after the terrifying failed truck attack, we held new emergency HOA elections. Mark Davies won unanimously, promising complete transparency and a return to sensible, community-focused rules. His very first act as president was to formally eliminate nearly all of Victoria's ridiculous, draconian restrictions. From this moment forward, he announced to thunderous applause at his first meeting, "This HOA exists to serve the residents, not control them." The FBI managed to recover a significant portion of the stolen HOA funds from various hidden accounts. We, the residents, voted overwhelmingly to use that money for actual community improvements. A brand new, desperately needed playground for the kids, long overdue repairs to the clubhouse, and a comprehensive environmental restoration project for the lake itself, especially after the tunnel system was professionally and permanently sealed by federal engineers. And my driveway? The innocent 6-inch 2-wide slab of concrete that had inadvertently catalyzed everything. It was officially, and rather anticlimactically, declared fully compliant with all rewritten, reasonable regulations. The infamous yellow semi-truck was eventually sold at a police auction, with all proceeds going directly into a restitution fund for the families who had lost their homes due to the Petersons' predatory schemes. 6 months later, life at Crystal Bay Shores had genuinely transformed. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now held weekly potluck cookouts by the newly repaired clubhouse. The lake sparkled again, clean and healthy, thanks to proper maintenance. Our drastically reduced HOA fees were actually funding this time. The community watch signs were gone, replaced by welcome home banners. Yesterday evening, I sat peacefully on my dock, watching children laughing and splashing in the clear water, families picnicking along the now public shoreline access points. Linda Crawford walked over hesitantly, holding out a plate of still warm cookies. "I still feel just awful for believing Victoria's lies for so long," she said quietly, sitting down beside me on the weathered wood. "You weren't the only one fooled, Linda," I replied honestly, accepting a cookie. "They spent years carefully building that web of deception and fear." She managed a small, sad smile. "You know what's really ironic? If they had just let you keep your perfectly fine driveway and found some other, slightly less convenient smuggling route, they might have gotten away with it all for years longer." I couldn't help but laugh softly at the sheer absurdity of it all. How a simple, infuriating dispute over a few inches of concrete had managed to unravel a sophisticated, multi-million-dollar criminal enterprise and, against all odds, unite a deeply fractured community. As the sunset painted the water in breathtaking shades of gold and purple, I realized something profound. My stubborn stand against one unreasonable, vindictive HOA violation hadn't just preserved my own property rights, it had inadvertently helped liberate an entire neighborhood from years of unseen fear and corruption. Sometimes, the biggest battles, the ones with the most significant consequences, start with the smallest, most seemingly insignificant acts of standing up for what's right. Don't ever underestimate the power of your own voice or the potential impact of refusing to back down when you know you're being wronged. Even if it's just about a driveway. You never know what larger truths you might uncover or what positive changes you might set in motion for yourself and your community. Now, when I pull into my lakeside driveway each evening, I no longer feel a knot of anxiety about violation notices or neighborly complaints. Instead, I'm greeted by genuine waves and warm smiles from people who learned the hard way that a true community means standing together, supporting each other, not just standing silently in line behind a clipboard-wielding tyrant. What did you think of this story? Have you ever had a run-in with an out-of-control HOA? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this.